get started in maybe 1 minute?
I just need a few to swap the links over so that they
Okay,
can
so how about we
update
say
on the-
1:30, Carrie?
Perfect.
Okay, and sorry again to the panelists from the administration. Appreciate you being here. Sorry for the delay. Carrie, Shane, we're all ready to go?
In interest of time, I'd get started and the link will be converted over momentarily. So if I were chairing it, I'd get started.
Okay. Shane, you all set?
Yeah, I'm all good on my end.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just trying to adjust my screen. Is there a way we can fix the screen so I can see everyone?
It says my video can't be started because it has stopped. I don't know if you can hear me. If I'm.
I can hear you, Councilman
It
Hida.
should be all set now. Sorry about that.
Okay, hold on one second. All right, let's see here.
Okay.
I'm also trying to adjust it so I can see everyone. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Hey, you guys. Hey, everyone. Good to see you all. And my sincere apologies for the delay, but you'll appreciate we were just reviewing grants for all of your departments with your incredible colleagues from fire as well as BPD. So thank you. Apologies for the delay. Good to see everyone. I'm going to just start us off with obviously a script for logistical purposes, and then we will jump in. And thank you, Shane and Carrie as well. So for the record, my name is Andrea Campbell. I'm Boston City Councilor for District 4. I chair the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice. I am joined by my council colleagues. I know Councilor Mejia is here. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anyone. Councilor Mejia is here for now, and as others join, I will recognize them. This is a public hearing. It is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV. It will rebroadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, Verizon Fios Channel 1964. We will take public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify, please email shane.packpac@boston.gov to sign up. And we will ask that you state your name for the record and offer comments that are no more than 2 minutes. You can also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.ps@boston.gov. Today's hearing is on docket numbers 0323, an order for a hearing to explore and recommend diversity initiatives for the City of Boston's public safety agencies. We are joined by several members of the administration from the police department, fire department, human resources, and EMS. So thank you all for being here. Today, the purpose of the hearing is a hearing that I called as Chair of Public Safety to look at the diversity and to get updates on the diversity numbers and strategies with respect to our Boston public safety agencies. I appreciate everyone being here. I will keep my comments really brief, and then we'll turn it over to some folks from the administration. Start with my council colleagues for any opening remarks, and then turn it over to folks from the administration. So increasing diversity in our public safety agencies, I think, is an important piece of our broader work to reform and transform our public safety system to be more equitable and more just, which means, of course, not only eliminating racism and bias in these systems, but ensuring the jobs, which are very high paying, are accessible to everyone, and that the departments reflect the communities they serve. We know this is critically important to build trust with residents and also with our departments. We don't need another report. There are many that tell us that this is true. And while we've had some progress, there's still a lot more work to do. And though Boston is a majority minority city, our public agencies are still overwhelmingly white. Boston residents make up 44.9% white, 22.7% Black, 19% Hispanic, 9.4% Asian. And yet many of our departments are still not only at the lower tier ranks, but at the higher ranks within our departments, overwhelmingly white. 2 years ago, I was blessed to actually work with many folks in the department, as well as advocates from the community, including veterans, to talk about how we expand our diversity numbers in all of our public safety agencies. After several conversations and hearings and a series of conversations, the work started in 2018. We held a hearing on June 14th. In 2018, I put forward a report of my own recommendations as to how we would get there and what specific things the City of Boston could do to expand and increase diversity, especially in our leadership positions in all of these departments. I worked with each and every one of the departments, including many that are on this call, including our Chief Diversity Officer, to compile information, to reflect upon it, to think about it, and then of course to put forth recommendations. The hearing today is designed to have an update on those recommendations and a conversation about what has been done and where we want to go from here. I will, before I turn it over to the administration, I do want to have Councilor Mejia, if you have any opening remarks, I'd like to give you the floor. And then after that, I'll turn it over to the administration. I'll start with a couple of questions just on the current numbers in our departments, and then go to each department for some opening remarks. But Councilor Mejia, I will start with you. Thank you for being here. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Campbell, for bringing this issue to the council. As the chair of Committee of Small Business and Workforce Development, I'm incredibly interested in finding ways to diversify our police force. In the hearing we just came from, one of the doctors talked about finding ways to enhance community trust. One way to do that is to have a police force that looks and talks more like the people that they serve. I look forward to finding ways to achieve that goal and working to replicate that across all city agencies. Thank you so much for bringing this to the table, and look forward to being a thought partner with our police force to close this gap.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I do want to stress, we're definitely going to be talking to, of course, the police department on their diversity numbers, but we want to look at this issue across every public safety agency, because we know fire is different than police, and EMS, of course, different than fire and police, but all critically important to the work we do in the city of Boston. So thank you all for your leadership. I also want to acknowledge we've been joined by Councilor Liz Braden. Councilor, do you have any opening remarks you'd like to speak to before I jump right in?
No, please jump right in, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Thank you, Shane. And feel free, all of you can unmute yourself and say, Counselor, you're muted. We can't hear a word you're saying. So I'll start with you, Chief Tavares, but before and I'll have you direct which department head or who you want to go first. But before we do that, it would be great to paint the picture, right? So if we could provide really quickly for council colleagues, as well as the public, the current numbers of each department. I have numbers from 2018. I'm not sure. I think there's been some changes. So if you have current numbers as to the number of police officers that are broken down by race and gender, the same with fire and the same with EMS. And then of course, the same for top tier positions. So this is of course, lieutenants, captains, superintendents. That would be helpful to start with. I could read mine, but they're 2018.
Councilor, should I just proceed?
Yes, that'd be great.
Afternoon, Madam Chair and Councilor Braden, Councilor Mejia. Thanks for having me today. As you mentioned, Councilor, this is a conversation that we started over 2 years ago. I'm joined by several members of the administration today from all the public safety agencies. And to your point, we've asked them to come prepared with all the information. So as they dive in, maybe they can start with the current numbers. Just talking holistically, there's been a lot of progress made in the past 2 years. As you may recall, there were several recommendations put forth 2 years ago. We're happy to report we've moved forward on several of those recommendations, including the recommendations that have been put forth by the mayor's task force that just convened. So we believe we have a really good story to share, including a lot of progress we've made over the last 2 years. So we're happy to dive into this conversation.
So why don't we start this? We could go around and maybe Gaskins, Michael Gaskins, if you want to start with the police numbers, and then we can go to Chief Hooley for the EMS numbers. And then Commissioner, we could go to you for the fire numbers, and then circle back around to you, Chief Tavares, to talk about some updates, and then go from there.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. Great to see you.
Good to be seen, ma'am. So for Boston Police right now, for our sworn personnel, you just want me to go into just our sworn personnel as it relates to where we are right now, or do you want me to talk about the last 4 classes in terms of recruitment?
The sworn personnel as it relates right
Okay.
now, as it is
Yes.
right now.
Yes,
So
ma'am, I have that.
2,000 plus officers.
Yeah. So we have 2,750, excuse me, 2,000. Let me just make sure I give you the 2,132 for as far as sworn personnel. Right now, we're currently at 64% white American. That includes 58.9% male, 6.8% female. We're at 21% African American. That includes 16.3% male, 5% female. We're at 9.6% Latin American or Latinx. That includes 8.9% male, 1.7% female, and we are at currently around 2% Asian American, which is 2.1% male, 0.3% female.
What's the total female that, I know you did the breakdown, just curious, total, I mean, I think in 2018 it was 13% female, right? I think we've obviously gone up since then.
Let me see what I have for that. I'd have to do some quick math in terms of calculation, but we have gone up considerably, especially over the past three recruit classes. We saw a record number in 2019 of 30% of our class, which equaled 32, were women. So we have seen a marked increase. I could do some calculation real quick and let you know how many women we have across the board.
That'd be great.
That's 294, ma'am.
Okay, 294. I can do the percentage. Okay, and then just top tier. Michael, that'd be great.
Top tier, there have been some recent changes in terms of the appointments, deputy superintendent, superintendent, but the Commissioner Gross has appointed with the input of the mayor, has appointed the most diverse command staff in the history of the department. And I can, I'd have to, again, I don't have the exact numbers, but I can look at the numbers and report that back as soon as possible, as we're in,
No, that'd be
this
great.
conversation. Yes, ma'am.
And I do want to acknowledge Counselor Flynn's been joined us. Thank you, Counselor Flynn, for being here. So I had, Michael, I had 121 BPD. This was lieutenants, captains, superintendents, 86% white, 12% black, 2% Hispanic, 1% Asian, 7% female. But this was in 2018. So if you have updated numbers for that, we can come back, but that would be great.
Yes, ma'am. Again, I'm looking across the board here right now. Of the 10 superintendents that we have, 5 are white male, 1 is a white female, 3 are black male, 1 is a black male, and then deputy superintendents, of the 12, 4 white male, 1 white female, 2 black male, 2 black female, 2 Hispanic male, and then 1 Asian male. Captains, which again, we probably won't see a lot of movement in the captains area because it has to do with applicant pools and the number of people that take the test at the time. So we're still drawing from the 2015 test. But right now we have, of the 22 captains, 19 are white male, but we have 2 black males and 1 Hispanic male.
Thank you. I'll go on to, and then I'm going to circle back around, just getting updated numbers and also to share with colleagues. Chief Hooley, hi, good to see you. It'd be great if you could give us an update on, your technicians and of course, in terms of numbers and breakdown, because we have the 2018 numbers.
Sure.
And then of course, your chief superintendents, captains, lieutenants, and great to see you. And thank you, of course, for your leadership and work as well.
No, thank you. Good to see you as well. Thanks. Let me see.
Quickly want to acknowledge that Councilor Flaherty is also on. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Back to you, Chief Hooley.
Okay, thanks. We're just pulling up those senior ranks up there per day, because that changed quite a bit since the last time I think we reported. But I'll start off with the general overall numbers. We currently have 379 uniform full-time employees of all ranks. We're budgeted for 399. So that means we have 20 vacancies. We're actually currently in the process of preparing for the next recruit class. We had written exams and practical exams this week, And the interviews were actually going on, they started today, so they're ongoing. They started today, so we're hoping to fill those positions as well and get you an update on that. On for the overall numbers, let me see the change right now on race and gender. On white, it's 73%. It was previously reported at 68. Black was at 13%, which is this no change. Hispanic, 9% is the current, where previously it had been 7. Asian and Pacific Islanders, that's up to 4% now. That had been 1%. And female has remained constant at 32% back in the previous report and in this most recent one. We have we do have 9 people who again, it's self-identified. So we do have 9 people who have what's the word? Who chose to remain unspecified, and 5 people who selected 2 or more. So that's how they're captured in the public health stats. On the command structure, so deputy superintendents, superintendents, chief, 5 out of the 17 are identified as Black. That's 29%. 6% Hispanic, and let me see. So the remainder there would be white. Whatever. I'll have to type this up.
Very helpful.
Yeah, and the last since I can't remember the last one spoke. I think this was filed back in February. I know just a couple of other changes in the superior ranks since then on a few of the promotions. There's a couple of people. One of them is actually joining us today. She'll be presenting on some of our information today. Deputy Superintendent Lee Alexander.
Okay.
I believe you met her out at Codman Square
That's right.
when that tragedy happened outside. But
Yeah, unfortunately.
Deputy Superintendent with us now, and she's taken on some expanded duties overseeing our diversity recruitment and engagement and a lot of employee development focus. And we've recently promoted 2 paramedics, one Black male, Garvey Cameron, who's now a shift commander, and Janela Menez, who's a Latina paramedic. They've both become deputy superintendents, and they'll be functioning as shift commanders as well.
Okay.
Of course, I'll get this all in writing to update for you.
No, this is great. Thank you. And then now I'll quickly go to Commissioner. Good to see you on just the fire numbers, and then I'll circle back around for some quick presentations, and then I'll open it up to colleagues.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, and all the councils and everyone on. So let me just give you a quick breakdown of the percentage here. So we have 1,474 firefighters, that's including all ranks. And of that, 275 are Black, which is 18.7%. 120 are Hispanic, that's 8.1%. 15 are Asian for 1%. And 1,064 white, that's 72.2%. Of that, 19 are females, and that's a 1.3%. Our last class had 2 females in it. We're currently, and in our hiring process, and I'm sure you'll ask this, as you already know, we're bound by civil service law. So, but but we're working on some different ways. And one is the language list, certification list, which we're forming a new class right now. And out of the 55 possible recruits we're going to have, 15 of those will be language. So now let me give you a breakdown on the ranking system. So out of black firefighters, we have, let me see here. We currently have one deputy chief. We had two, but one retired this past year. We have 6 black district chiefs, 7 black captains, 36 black lieutenants, and 227 firefighters, for a total of 275. Hispanic, we have 2 district chiefs, 4 captains, 16 lieutenants, and 98 firefighters, for a total of 120. Asians, we have 15 firefighters. None of them are officers. That's up considerably from a few years back, where I believe we only had 1 Asian on the job. So we've made a lot of strides in that area. White, we have 20 deputy chiefs, 45 district chiefs, 67 captains, and 173 lieutenants, 759 firefighters, for a total of 1,064. If we go down to the gender breakdown, under the females, we have 2 Asians, we have 10 blacks, 2 Hispanics, and 5 whites, for a total of 19. And males, we have, okay, I think I kind of covered the males on the breakdown. That none of that doesn't include fire alarm operators. So did you want me to go over those numbers with you, or?
No, that's okay. Thank you, Commissioner, but we'll get those separately and follow up to also get all this in writing too. I took notes, of course, too.
Yep. Okay. That should
Perfect.
work for me then. Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to you, Chief Tavares, and I know we're way behind time, so I apologize in advance. I know how busy you guys are. So I will go to you, Chief Tavares, for some updates, and then specifically, the purpose of the hearing too is to go through the recommendations in the report, of course, to see what we've done, where we need to collaborate to do better, that kind of thing. And then, of course, I want to make sure I give opportunity to my council colleagues as well to chime in. So maybe I'll give you, 5 minutes.
Sure. So I think, just looking broadly at our public safety offices, there's been a lot of conversation on how do we get the numbers up. I think starting from 2 years ago to now, we've adopted a lot of new tools, which we think are going to be helpful. A lot of the recommendations that have been put forth has to deal around, BPD has a great framework in their cadet program. And I know a lot of the answers to fire has been, how do we create something similar? Since the last time we had this hearing, we've since filed the cadet legislation that's now cleared the House of Representatives, is now in the Senate. And we're cautiously optimistic that that's going to pass. In addition, BPD has done a great job with their cadet programs. One way we've been able to sort of make sure we're diversifying and getting neighborhood kids is through our cadet program. And we've had a class that was 50% women. And so that's been a great tool in making sure that we've been able to move the gender piece as well. But I think I would say that more holistically, that we've had a lot more strategic approach, not just to our public agency officers, but equity across the whole as we sort of go forward. As you may know, the mayor has since hired Chief Carolyn Crockett as the Chief Equity Officer. She's been in the process of building out her team. In the meantime, we've added Chief Diversity Officers in our public, in the BPDA, in fire, in police. We're looking at in tech and IT. So I think there's been a lot more strategic coordination around equity and making sure that we're sort of aligning all of these sort of visions as we go forward. On top of that, we've built on the recommendations of the residency requirement. There's been a home rule petition to move the residency requirement from 1 to 3 years. We think that's going to give us the ability to pull in a lot more neighborhood kids into the fold. Part of the recommendations that came out of the task force was one of the recommendations you had put forth was looking at civil service. There has been a recommendation put forth by the task force to add a preference, a secondary preference for BPS grads. That's something the mayor has committed to looking at. So there's a lot of plans in motion to continue to build on these efforts. I'm going to allow the public safety agencies just to get a little bit more into their recruitment practices, what they've done in terms of outreach, creating partnerships and engagement, getting the Vulcans involved with the firefighters in terms of recruitment, I think has been a great partnership. The first female officer that was hired in BFD came from the language certification. So I think that's a great story, and that's something that BPD and BFD are going to continue to use as a tool going forward. So I think we're doing everything within the framework of what we can to continue to diversify department. That's on the personnel front. At the same time, we're looking at, trainings on how do we build culture across the administration. And we're engaged now with consultants to look at racial equity trainings, not just in public safety, but across the entire administration, which would apply to all 18,000 plus of our employees. This would be the first time we've had such a robust training that touches everyone from leadership down the organization. So we've got a lot of these motions sort of already underway. But I would love for sort of our public safety agencies to have the chance to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the efforts they've made to sort of build new partnerships and help sort of move the needle on some of these numbers.
Yeah, before I go, just thank you, Chief Tavares. And before I go to department heads for just a quick opening or a little bit more to share before, and then going to council colleagues, 2 questions. One is on the data dashboard. I mean, obviously before George Floyd, before the task force, we had been talking about lack of diversity and working as in collaboration with all of us on this Zoom to change that. I think we all care deeply about the issue. I'm not gonna try to suggest we don't. One of the recommendations was releasing the data on our public safety dashboard, right? So that you as a layperson and citizen could go on and see what the diversity numbers were for each department. So essentially what the chairs and chief diversity officers and commissioners and chiefs just shared, is that available? Is that available? And if not, which I don't think it is, the last I checked, when do we see that happening? Because it goes to just the transparency piece. When do we see that data being accessible on the dashboard? And then my second question is on civil service. Yes, I the hearing we held, all pathways are good. BPS pathway, I think it's all incredible. One of the recommendations was us specifically studying civil service, and this actually came from the veterans.
Yep.
And looking at the pros and cons of civil service on our public safety hiring, on our public safety promotions. Curious if we've explored as a city to either do it in partnership with, say, MAPC, who's done it with other municipalities, or someone else to really have a deep dive versus waiting for the state, which can take forever. So those are my 2 questions directed for you, and then I'll allow our commissioners and chiefs to talk for a few minutes.
Sure, I'll touch on the data piece first. When it comes to the dashboard, I think what you're currently looking at is our first iteration of the dashboard. I think there's been a lot of requests, not only on public safety to see, to your point, the leadership breakdown, but a whole other slate of categories, including disability and sort of veterans categories. So the answer is yes. We're currently working with all of our public safety agencies to update that information into the new iteration of the dashboard, which we hope to launch this spring. So that information is forthcoming. On the answer on the question of civil service, part of the recommendations that came out of the task force was a review of the current civil service process. One of the recommendations that called forth was a preference for high school graduates of BPS, which is a civil service issue. And so the mayors adopted the recommendations from the task force, which called for a review of the civil service process in what it's had in terms of equity for hiring.
Okay, I would just say, I think the data that we just listed should be out there. I mean, we've talked about this yesterday.
Yep.
And I think we should be doing our own more comprehensive study of civil service, the pros and cons, because there are good things, there's benefits.
Yep.
I just think it allows us to have a more thoughtful conversation on what we could do with civil service, if anything at all, in terms of diversity.
And Council, the one thing I would note on civil service is, I think Boston's is in a unique position than most cities and towns when it comes to civil service. If you look at civil service across the state, I think it tends to work pretty well for most cities and towns. I think Boston is an outlier in that, Boston's where everyone wants to be, right? And so I think, it's more specific to Boston than across the board, I think. But to your point, I do think a thorough review, which the
Yeah, I
mayor,
mean, we already know there's about 17 municipalities have opted out of civil service entirely for their public safety agencies, or there's some others that are considering, do we do a point system like the state police or something else? But just need more information there. So I guess I'll start with you, Michael, to give you a few minutes, and then I'll go to to Chief Hooley, then I'll go to the commissioner, and then I'll open it up to council colleagues. I'll give you each a few minutes if that works, and then I'll go to council colleagues.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So my position, as you're aware, was created in 2017, and we've made tremendous strides. I'm the Diversity Recruitment Officer and Examination Administrator for the Boston Police Department. I am committed to this recruitment of sworn personnel and cadets. I also oversee the promotional exam planning planning and execution process. We just executed the last phase of our promotional exam for sergeants, but we executed the promotional exams for all three ranks between September and December. So we've seen some progress in our recruit classes in particular with regard to our outreach. We partner with the City of Boston's Career Fair Series, local colleges, universities, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs. I serve on the board for the English high school's legal and protective studies curriculum. So we believe we have good partnerships and good conduits in order for people to be aware of the types of positions in the process to become a police officer. This starts with even just a presence on the City of Boston's website. So boston.gov/police. That was one of the initiatives that we took from a marketing and information standpoint. We also host information sessions throughout the city. And most of them are centrally located at the Bowling Building. And most of them have upwards of 100 plus attendees at each. And we just recently did our first virtual info session. We invite our city agency colleagues along as well. Both BFD and EMS have been at our as guests to our information sessions, including the park services. So in terms of our full approach to recruitment, we have seen an uptick, especially as it relates to our female recruits. From 2016, we had, it was upwards of a small number, but out of the 56 recruits, we had 78% were white American. And then 2017, when I came on board, we saw that number from the white American male number go from the 70+ percent to 60%. And we're hovering around between 59, 60% now each class. And so incrementally, we've seen numbers a little bit more balanced from our recruit class. It could lend to the number of overall recruits that we have. We have a larger number as opposed to a smaller class size. But I want to say we can point directly to promotions and partnerships with civil service, whereas the 2019 tests shows that for the Boston residents, we've had the most diverse applicant pool actually register and take that particular exam. As we've done our first draw from that list, we intend to continue to draw from that list until it expires in 2021. But we've seen a pretty good balanced class, as we just put in a class as of November 30th, 2020. And of the 110, we're showing 65% white American. That includes 9 women. And so again, with the male percentage, we would say we're still hovering around the 60% percentile for white American male, 19% Latinx, 13% Black American, and 3% Asian American. So we're maintaining that number of women, female recruits. We're very excited about that. And we're also maintaining the secondary languages that are reported. We make it a general practice to include language certification every time we ask for a list. We intend to do that moving forward, and we continue to partner with Boston Fire. We were successful in sharing information in 2018 when we were granted language certification. This most recent time, I think it had more to do with timing. We weren't granted language certification, but they were happy to share their successes early on in the year, and we look to duplicate that for the next draw.
No, that's very helpful. And that collaboration across department too. So thank you. I'm going to go to Chief Hooley. I don't know if you want Lieutenant Alexander to speak, but I'll defer to you, and then I'll go to Commissioner.
Okay, no, thank you. And I just, too quick, I was going to hand off something to Deputy Alexander here in a second, but when I was trying to look back at some of the, just to give you one example of even some of the, as we try to make progress, there's still, challenges. For example, because as I was stating earlier, that currently, the deputy superintendent rank, which is one of our most senior positions in Boston EMS, it provides oversight for the majority of our workforce, is the most diverse rank in Boston EMS now, with 5 out of 12 of the members, that's 42% being female, 5 out of 12, 42% being persons of color, and as well as our training captains who are at the second most diverse rank in our department, with 2 out of 5 being persons of color and 2 out of 5 being women. The opportunities for promotion, then, that means that you're drawing from some of the lower ranks, or in the case of the deputies, we wound up, indirectly, reducing diversity at the paramedic rank. So our chore now is to develop more people to be ready to take the paramedic exams when we do our next rounds of promotion there. On the idea in your document, Counselor, when one of the things you're there in Part C about coordinating recruiting efforts, we try to look beyond not just working with BPD, BFD, but a lot looking at other city departments, BCYF, OWD, a lot of the Boston Public Health areas. But I think who's best to speak to it would be Deputy Lee Alexander. So Lee, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Good morning, Counselor. Thank you for having me. So just some of the coordinating recruiting efforts that I've taken on along with department members in a few short months have been, recruiting, engagement, so keeping our existing members involved and engaged, but also recruiting new members to increase our selection pool. So the department has invested funds where we recently did some radio ads. We reached out on, 96.9, which is very popular amongst the youth in the community. So we had members, myself included, but there's a group of members of color that created a organization called United Coalition of Emergency Medical Service Providers, USEP for short. So a couple of those members, myself included, we did a radio ad just kind of highlighting perks of the job, and just trying to inspire the youth to either go to the website, which would also gear them towards the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. And through the Office of Workforce Development, there's opportunity for city residents to get free tuition towards our Boston EMS run EMT course, which coincidentally lines up with our hiring process. So the thought is to get folks from the radio ad into Office of Workforce Development into the upcoming EMT course. And hopefully when the EMT course is completed, that will lead into the next hiring process. So they'll have all the information new and fresh, and they'll be successful. So along with that, we've also been working with the Boston Public Health Commission, where they have BAHEC. So they're teaching 40 students, all from inner city schools and some Metco schools as well, and just getting them inspired towards a career in EMS. I've spoken on some webinars with them, and we've had other guest employees of color that have spoken about, highlights of the career, being in the city, just encouraging them with the potential for a nice income that'll set their family up well. So along with that, we've also coordinated with, I've reached out to Michael Gaskins as well, who's, kept me on a really good path as far as ideas and innovations and that sort of thing. So we have, I've worked with the GROW group. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's a youth group of young ladies of color within the city. A lot of them are high school students. I've talked to them about the career as an EMT and how they can potentially move up the ranks. So a lot of different outreach and events. We're working across with fire as well. They hosted a summer event where we were invited with our summer interns. We talked to their summer interns or their summer academy and, said, maybe fire is a career, maybe it isn't, but this is also a career. So it was hundreds of inner city youth that were very attentive. So along with that, we're exploring career days, Zoom career days. We're also working with the Private Industry Council, who they're more health career focused and that sort of thing. So coming in January, we're gonna do a lot of Zoom webinars. And actually just before this hiring process, the Office of Workforce Development created a set of videos explaining the process. There were 3 separate 1-hour sessions where they had over 30 minutes of open Q&A where they can ask anything and everything. And we had members available to answer all the questions.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. And just the collaboration, I think a couple of years ago, and one department was doing one thing and finding it challenging. So I really appreciate these updates. Commissioner, I'll go over to you for updates, and then I'm going to go to my colleagues who have been patiently waiting. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Boston Fire Department is open to exploring all avenues of partnerships that will augment and complement its own recruiting efforts. And so I wanted to thank the police and EMS for any collaboration we have with them. They're a great resource for us. And I know we'll be reaching out to the police on the cadet program as well. Currently, the Boston Fire Department's recruiting efforts are done by its diversity recruitment officer and by a recruit team comprised of minority firefighters detailed to headquarters from the field in months leading up to the firefighter exams every year. That's every other year. For the past couple of years, recruiting is nonetheless done throughout the entire year by an ad hoc team of firefighters, including the department's female liaison and the Boston Fire Department's public information officers. We also have the Teen Academy, which is run during the summer, which is a great program. Back in 2017, I believe we had 20 kids in there. This year, largest ever, we had over 50. So that's run by minority firefighters volunteering to do this and mentoring the kids, and it's been a great success. We also bring the police in there and EMS and military recruiters, so they get a lot of counseling and direction. So it's great for them. The other thing we do is the community enrichment program, which is run by minority firefighters, and they mentor these kids. They play basketball. It's a basketball league, and it's run at BCYF facilities. And once again, it's a great chance to play basketball with the kids, talk to them, mentor them, and that's been a huge success. And we're going to build on that and continue doing with that. Also getting back to the exams. So back in, to show how successful the female liaison and the whole recruiting team has been. The females back in 2018 exam, there were 59 people signed up, 59 females. In 2020, it was up to 129. So we're making strides there. We're also we're working on videos that are going to help the women with the physical test part of it. And we also ran a O2X course back in October, first ever, and it was run by, so O2X is a group run by ex-Navy SEALs, former Navy SEALs. I shouldn't call them ex, you never ex. And they deal with physical fitness, mental health, stress, resiliency, nutrition, sleep, how to sleep properly. It's a great thing. And I had them write a program specifically for women. So it was a huge success. I think we had 45 women, and 14 of those we invited from other departments. So we started a networking with the women, whereas, a lot of these departments outline, I'll say like Revere or, Chelsea or whatever, they may have one or two women. So this was a great opportunity for them to meet with our women, and they can just, talk women to women. I don't know what they talk about, but anyways, it was really a great success. I had nothing but good reports back on that. And that's something that we're looking to do every year for the women and expand on that. They really loved it. So I'm very happy and proud that we were able to do that. So, and in the future, the Boston Fire Department, it's my hope that we can have a dedicated team of recruiters for outreach events, for year-round recruiting on a consistent basis. But, as with everything, it's a budget issue. So, but we'll do our best. That's all I have for right now. If you have any questions on that.
No, thank you, Commissioner. Who was here first? I can't remember. Shane, what's the order again?
So I'm pulling it up right here. I believe it was Councilor Mejia.
Okay, Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Wow, thank you.
I know, right? Good.
No, but it was very informative, and I really do appreciate all the data. And so I'll just keep my questions really brief. I'm just curious in terms of what languages are spoken by public safety officials. How does language competency determine where our officers are stationed? And does the city ask for language competency when looking for prospect applicants? And can you just speak a little bit to the language certification process? What does it look like? How are applicants certified? And then I'm also curious in terms of, I understand all of your outreach efforts. I'm curious as to whether or not you have a survey that is shared with the public so that they can tell you how they're experiencing the hiring recruitment process so that you can get some feedback. And then based on what you hear from those who are trying to navigate, that you can tweak your recruitment efforts accordingly to how people are receiving the information that they're getting. And I'm just curious if there's a survey that exists. And then I'm just wondering, one thing is to recruit and the other is to retain. I'm curious about what your retention strategies look like, and what type of environments are we creating for people of diverse backgrounds, so that they can feel fully embraced once they are entered into one of our departments. And then what is your track towards stepping up the ladder? You know, I know that oftentimes there's requirements and certifications, but I'm just curious about, like, how are we reducing the hardships for a lot of folks who are trying to reach, quote unquote, the top. I know I asked a lot of questions and I don't remember half of them because they're all coming out from right top of here. But I hope one of y'all are taking notes because I do expect some answers from some of the questions that I've asked. Thanks.
Madam Chair, do you want me to,
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think
where we have the language?
that's right. I mean, I think the language for you, the police department, I mean, it's critically important for the diversity piece. So that'd be great. If you and maybe Michael want to speak to it, or Chief Tavares. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. So Councilor Mejia, we went to civil service and Connie Wong had to kind of beat them up over getting the cert, but we finally got what we wanted. We get it on a regular basis. And we're now up to 5 separate languages that we, the 5 main languages that are spoken in the city: Spanish, Haitian Creole, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Cape Verdean. So those are the 5 languages that we draw on. Does that answer your question on that? Or do you have more to ask on that? It's a separate certification list. So it's different and we can pick from that list. Once again, it goes by score and it's separate from the other list of recruits, potential recruits.
Okay, so I'm curious in regards to the other questions.
Okay,
Councilor
the recruiting question as far as the survey, I think we have to, we'll have to work on that. I'm not sure if we actually do that.
Maybe Chief Tavares, because that's a question that goes across different departments. For the questions that go across a whole host of departments, maybe Chief Tavares can respond. And then on this, some of the recruiting specifically, whether it's language, which is applicable to fire and police, that would be, Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add on the language piece.
Sure, maybe I'll go and then I think Michael can jump in. Councilor Mejia, I think the important thing to keep in mind about the language preferences is that those are approved by the state. And so all we can do is apply to the state for language preferences. And basically what we have to do is show justification for why we need those. There's not a clear-cut process in terms of what HRD is looking for when they approve those waivers. I think it's more up to us to make the case as to why we need them, right? And I think it's something we've been going after over the years, and we've been more successful with it recently. So I think strategically, it's something we're going to continue to go after. On the question of surveys, I think just speaking more broadly across the administration is something we've been engaged in. The Public Health Commission has recently launched a survey with all individuals for the health agency, talking about, to your point, how do they feel about working for the city? Is there room for upward mobility? Just anything about working for the city. The BPDA has launched something similarly. And also what we're doing is we brought on a consultant that's going to roll out racial equity trainings across the administration. And part of their efforts is not only going to be outreach within the administration, but also in the public. What do you expect to see from your government? What are the priorities that I think aren't being touched on, right? So to your point, that engagement is going to drive a lot of our policies going forward. So I do think part of that
Yeah.
strategy should be used in our public safety agencies.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear in terms of what I'm in regards to the survey. It's not just those folks who are already working for the city. I'm curious about those who have tried or have gone through career fairs or have gone through the interview process. I'm curious about what their experience has been, as those who have not been employed or
Yeah.
hired to work, just to understand what their experience has been like and what can we learn about their journey in this process to help improve the recruitment process is what I'm trying to get at.
And to your point, Counselor, I think you actually showed up to one of the neighborhood career fairs we had launched in Mattapan. In that process, what we do is, as we're trying to connect external stakeholders to some, private companies that may not be the city, what we've done is, to your point, is ask them directly about what's worked and what hasn't. And a lot of the feedback we've got during those process helped us guide, future events, whether it's making sure that events were centrally located near transportation, right? What are those best times to do it, right? Is it after work or is it on a Saturday morning where individuals have more availability, right? What are the types of jobs they want us to come equipped with? What were some of the barriers they had, right? Should we have computers on site so they can do applications on site? So to your point, a lot of that engagement is what we've been doing and sort of driving our policies going forward. But yes, we do need to do more of that.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if once you get the feedback, if there's a way for you all to share it with the council so that we can see how the recruitment process is going and how people are experiencing it. And the last question, I had more than these, but I'm curious if you could just talk to me a little bit about the retention. I do know that, this is really about the recruitment and increasing our numbers, but I'm just curious if you could talk to what efforts are made to create an environment where people of color in particular want to stay within these city agencies. And I'd like to know a little bit about the environment that people are navigating.
Yeah, I think, just to touch broadly on the retention question, I think that's something we always think about, just not in public safety, but across the administration. I think one thing that's been difficult for us as we look at data, I think the farther you go back on data, I think the more you find out it's, we don't have the best data. It's sort of, how do we define, how we're capturing this information? So part of what we're working on now, to your point, is with HR and with our team to figure out, what does that all mean? What does it mean to retain someone? How do you capture that? Anecdotically, but also through data, how do we capture how do we define retention, right? How do we tell that story? And how do we find better metrics to be able to, tell when we've been able to capture and retain that employee? So I think that's something we're thinking about strategically, but trying to figure out, how do we best, even capture that data?
Mm-hmm. Chief Tavares, do you know why people leave? Why do I know you're like, what's that question? Let me just, I'm just curious, do you ever do exit interviews when let's say, for instance, someone has been a police officer for 15 years and they haven't reached the ranks. Do you have any kind of like any data that goes to show how long it takes a person of color to go from being a police officer to, I don't know what's the next thing, like a sergeant or a captain and then a deputy? I don't know the ranks, but I'm just curious, what's the longevity for someone to actually reach the ranks?
I don't have that data readily available, but I did two things to your points. Those are data sets in analysis we should be looking at. So I agree with the point that, we could be looking at all different metrics on its retention. But one thing we find is that, with the workforce of 20,000 plus employees, a lot of our employees aren't necessarily leaving. They're moving across departments, right? And so for us, that's another piece of, how do you count those employees that may be going from one job and they're just going across departments to the next? But it's just a beginning conversation on a whole bunch of this data. But to your point, it is a sort of exploratory conversations of how do we capture these things.
Yes, I do believe so. That's the case. And I know that I want to be mindful that I have other colleagues that have to go And so I don't know, Councilor Campbell, if there'll be another round of questions or an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll wait. Thank you.
No, thank you. Counselor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Campbell, for your leadership on this important issue. I had a couple questions. Just hearing some of the numbers about the Asian community at the Boston Public, at the police, the fire, and EMS. Do you think overall we have enough Asians in those three departments? And if we don't, what can we do to increase that? What type of specific retention or what type of specific recruiting can we do on Asian police, fire, and EMS?
Council, just to speak broadly, I think if you look at any of these agencies, what you're going to find is that when it comes to the Asian population, the applicant pool is very slim. And so I think all these agencies are dealing with they're operating from a space where there isn't a large selection pool. So I think the first strategy you need to figure out is how do we increase those numbers to make sure we have more individuals applying so that we can give these departments more access to the actual candidates. Some of the tools we've mentioned, I think, will help with that piece. The cadet programs allows us to sort of get more diversity in the applicant pool so that we have more access to some of these kids. The residency requirement, again, potentially larger class sizes. I think, the farther you get down on sort of civilian lists, the more diversity you have there. So I think it's a little bit of everything. And I don't think it's sort of, sort of a one size fits all. I don't know if any of the public safety agencies want to jump in on that.
I'll say one thing that we find, we've partnered with the Asian Civic Association and other groups to kind of have roundtable discussions around this. From a police department standpoint, there's a lot of cultural work that needs to be done in terms of the honor and integrity of police officers and how they're looked at in various countries. And so we have found that that type of behind the scenes work is helpful. But civil service, we've partnered with civil service on their posters as well. And they've actually posted, they've created posters in different languages. So that way we can try to address perhaps the person that's in the home that's influencing decisions to be able to read a poster in a language that they're familiar with and now influence that child. So our hope is to kind of chip away at this, but there's more of a cultural divide as it relates to the Asian population, I think, and law enforcement in particular. And these are conversations that I've had with deputies and others in our department from that background.
Council, from the fire department side, a lot of ours comes from the language cert right now. But if you don't mind, I'll let Connie Wong, where she deals with the language cert a lot, she can expand on this. Thanks, Connie. You're on mute.
Can't hear you.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, did not realize that. So I'll try to remember what I just said and I'll repeat it. But thank you, Councilor Campbell, for hosting this and Councilor Flynn for that question. The language certs was something that I was looking into when I first started, came back in 2014, and 2015 was my first hiring cycle, looking at what we can do to increase diversity and what was legally permissible within the bounds of civil service hiring laws. Language certs certainly came to mind. So I started with Spanish and Haitian Creole petitions to HRD and slowly built it up, adding Chinese and Vietnamese. Last year, I got all 5 top languages, including Cape Verdean for the city of Boston and the fire department. And this year, the same thing. I think when it comes to increasing the diversity, or let's say the specific question to Councillor Flynn's question about increasing Asians, it is one thing we have to tackle is imparting the knowledge, the different pathways that are permissible within the current civil service laws, how you can get on police or fire. And what I have found, because I mean, I'm an American-born Chinese. I grew up in Boston, grew up in Chinatown, speak 3 different Chinese dialects. But I know that even within my own community, there is a lack of knowledge in how to navigate civil service. So they don't know about language preferences. They don't know about residency. They don't know about age requirements, knowing that, you know, there's a lot of veterans that get preference right now, even amongst Asian veterans. My dad is a part of the Chinatown American Legion Post. I've tackled them to try to get more recruits or potential applicants, just as part of our own overall outreach and recruitment. There's a dearth of kids, and then even when there are the kids, they either do not meet residency or they do not meet age, or, you know, they meet all that and they're willing to be a Boston firefighter, but they either don't speak the language sufficiently to pass, because we use a third-party vendor for transparency purposes to assess the language proficiency, or they don't meet the residency. And I'll give you an example. One of the kids who wanted to apply did not move into Boston, even though he is a DAV, because none of his family live in this area anymore, and he is homeless. So he lives in outside of the city, somewhere he's familiar with, to sleep in his car, because then he knows the streets where the cops won't come and kick him away. So that is another hurdle. So for some of the demographics that we're trying to pursue, they have more than just one issue about how do they get on. It's multi-pronged. Some of it is age, some of it is residency, but I would say above all, it is the lack of knowledge how to navigate civil service. That is what I have found in the last 5 years. It's a lack of knowledge. So we have to do a better job going out into those communities and teaching them what the hiring process is really all about.
Well, thank you. Thank you for answering that question, and thank you, Connie. I have great respect for you and for your family, and I always spend a lot of time with your father with the American Legion Post, especially at this time. They do an outstanding Christmas drive for kids in the neighborhood, the Chinatown American Legion Post. So just want to say thank you to you and your family.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thank you. My final question, maybe it's to Chief Tavares. Chief, on the Boston Police recruitment, I know you highlighted the BPS might be getting some consideration as it relates to BPS graduates, as it relates to hiring preference. I highlighted the other graduates that are not BPS. I have a tremendous school in my district, for example, Cathedral High School. And there's probably not a more diverse school in the city. There's probably several, but it's high up there. It's probably about 95% Latinx and African American. But I think it's important also to recognize those students that they should be, if there is a BPS preference, I would like to see us do some outreach and work and include those types of private schools. Are we set in stone that it's only BPS?
No, Counselor. I think the recommendation is to look at civil service as a whole. But to your point, I do think, it's where the conversation of looking at these schools who fall outside of the BPS jurisdiction. And then the other question has been posed is also looking at language preference as a potential tool going forward for these kids as well. So to your point, no, I don't think it's set in stone that it's going to be BPS only. If that is,
Okay, I think it's important that we include in the discussion private schools such as the Cathedral. It's in the heart of my district, and it's again, it's mostly made up of African American and Latinx students, the South End Roxbury area. So I would have to support out of basic fairness, making sure that they're part of this issue as well. So I hope we can work on that issue going forward, Chief.
yeah, I'll definitely take that back, Counselor, but I don't disagree with the point.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you, Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and obviously it's great to see all the committed folks in front of us today. I have a couple thoughts. Obviously wanted to address and it's kind of the issue that I've been talking about for a little while, which is well, let me just make an introductory comment because I came on just a little late. I'll just say that, first of all, thank you, Chairwoman Campbell, for hosting and sponsoring. I think it's critically important across all ranks of public safety agencies that they reflect the rich diversity of our city, and that they know the neighborhoods, that they can speak the language of our residents, that they look like our residents, they understand the lived experience of our residents here in the city. Our public safety jobs are some of the higher paying jobs in the city, good salaries, good benefits, good working conditions. And I want all of our residents to have those jobs. So the city's made investments over the past few years to recruit and retain a more diverse workforce, which I'm sure the panelists, as they've described it in detail. So we're going to continue to make those efforts to continue to make headway. And so I appreciate everyone's efforts to date, particularly the council. I know the council's been on this, but there's just two areas that I wanted to highlight. And one is the mattress address, which is we currently have legislation pending up at Beacon Hill to move the residency requirement from 1 year to 3 years before you can sit for the civil service exam. That has been supported by our patrolmen, our detectives, our superior officers, and MAMLEO, as well as our commissioner. And with respect to the fire, it's been also supported by 718 and the Vulcans and the commissioner. And it's just sitting up at Beacon Hill and needs a push. That will probably that'll do tremendous, make the lift a lot easier, I should say. When we're losing so many seats per academy to folks that don't live in the city, didn't grow up in the city, are not from here, but they moved in, or they've listed a relative's address, an aunt or a grandparent or a cousin. That is doing a huge disservice to this entire discussion that we're having. And unless and until we cut that off and close that loophole and make sure that those very precious academy seats or recruit seats are left for folks that live in the city. And the way we do that is we move the requirement from 1 year to 3 year before you can even sit to take the test. That will free up a lot more seats in our class, in the recruit classes and the academy classes, that will go to city residents, that will help foster this discussion. So that's just sort of the first issue. So anyone in their respective circles, that if you have relationships up at Beacon Hill, please try to push to have this passed, because that legislation will go a long way in sort of solving some of these issues. And then the last issue, the second piece, is on the promotional exams. And I've had discussions in the past, and I know the chairwoman and I have discussed this ad nauseum in the past as well, particularly when she was council president. As you guys have a good vantage point, you know the men and women of your departments. And when you have the promotional exam, there's opportunities to go into to make those appointments, but our hands are tied, and they're mostly tied because of budgetary constraints. And I just think in our wisdom, we have the opportunity, because what happens is, for those that don't understand, after you take the civil service test and it's certified, it only lasts for so long. So many people die on the list, very capable men and women, and particularly people of color, that are on sort of the sergeant's list or the lieutenant's list or the captain's list or the deputy list. And we just need to make like one or two more appointments. And I know it's an upfront capital expenditure, upfront expenditure in terms of our overall operating, but sometimes it's worth it to sort of satisfy sort of the overall goals and objectives. And unfortunately, year in and year out, people are basically dying on the civil service list, only to have to sort of start the process over, only to have to take the test again, and then to have to get ranked again. And in our wisdom, I think that we have the opportunity to solve those problems. Unfortunately, it's going to take, it's really a budgetary issue. And I just think if we were a little bit more judicious about it, and we saw and seized those opportunities, whether it's on the police or the fire or EMS, where we have the ability to make a couple additional appointments, somehow, some way, we're going to have to find something for them to do in the interim. But I think that would be well served as a city by making those additional appointments and getting to those individuals before their score dies on the list. And again, this is something that we've banged our heads on over the last several years, where we have the opportunity, if we could just dip down a little bit and make some additional appointments, we would have been able to put people of color in positions, in decision-making positions, and in positions of leadership and authority that would, I think, to Connie Wong's point, would foster a lot in terms of just being able to recruit and to have folks be able to point to and to look up to, and consider maybe signing up and joining the ranks of EMS or fire or police. So not everyone wants to run into a burning building. Not everyone wants to chase a suspect down a dark alley late at night and have to make a life and death decision whether to discharge a firearm. And not everyone wants to be in the back of an ambulance, again, trying to save someone's life while they're bleeding out or they're in the middle of a cardiac event. So it's a special person that wants to do these jobs. And I just want to make sure that we're providing the best opportunity for all of our kids across the city to compete and to do that. And one way is to, again, eliminate that loophole, extend the residency from 1 year to 3 years before you can even sit for the test. And two, in leadership, be a little bit more judicious around appointment time and look at those lists, those civil service lists, and see where the rankings are, and maybe make an additional appointment or two to be able to get, to a person of color or a woman and get them into the fold and put them into a leadership position. So I know I'm opining on it, Madam Chair. You and I have discussed this. I know that the individuals that are on this Zoom know it well. And sometimes we just have to give them the resources to make those appointments to get the diversity that we're looking for, as opposed to allowing those scores to sort of die on the list. And it's an absolute travesty, particularly when you have someone that's extremely capable and experienced, that have paid their dues, and they're a good leader, and to watch their name and their number and their score just die on the list because we didn't have the resources or the budget capacity to make an additional appointment or two to be able to get to them, to get them into the fold. So that's my 2 cents on it. And I think if we did both, pass the legislation and give our commissioners the ability to look at that list and to maybe make an additional appointment or two, that would go a long way in solving this entire issue.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I'm just being mindful of time. Technically, we slated this to end at 3. I know we got started late. So of course, I'm glad you lifted that up. And this is an ongoing conversation. I think we all recognize, just from the numbers alone, that there's still much work to be done to ensure our agencies, of course, are reflective of the demographics of the city. I just quickly wanted to go through Chief Tavares. Obviously, I put out this report a couple of years ago, working in partnership with most folks on this call, after hearing from them. And I think we got some updates on the cadet program filed. Thank you, Chief Hooley. And Laura was such a partner in this work too. We got an update on the fire cadet legislation. We got updates on the numbers, of course, the data dashboard piece. We still have some work to do there. Civil service, some updates there. I think there's been some discussion, because of the recommendations from the Mayor's Task Force on Policing, on defining not only diversity, but that was a part of the report, not only defining diversity, but also making sure that we have folks to oversee this work across every single department. And I'm just mindful of time. I'm sort of going through some of them quickly, but where I do have some more questions is, one, on the promotional exam. There have been conversations for a long time on just the promotional exam, specifically in BPD, being discriminatory. There was a legal case on this, and officers who were, the court found, should be awarded back pay. So wanted some updates on just promotional exam use, BPD, that legal decision. Also, some updates on the hair test piece, right? That's come up in the conversation. We clearly have said we're not going to use it, but it's gone back to the bargaining table. Any updates on the hair test piece? And any updates on the bypass policy, which also came up in the context of BPD with respect to possibly limiting diversity. That came up during some of our conversations too.
Yeah, Counselor, I don't have any updates on the hair test policy.
Okay.
But I do think in terms of the bypass, it might be helpful for Michael to talk about the current bypass policy in terms of what it currently is, and any changes, Mike, that we have made. I know in terms of this may not speak specifically to the bypass policy, but in my line, I come across a lot of kids who are interested in BPD as a career. And there have been instances, for example, where you connect them with Mike. It may have been a small infraction that's keeping them and they get bypassed. But what's different this time around, and I hope Michael could talk about it, is the work we've done to, number one, is pull those kids back in, right? Bring them through the roundtable process and have a discussion about, what is it there that, to make sure that we're not bypassing them for misdemeanor issues. For example, a driving record, right? You may have a driving infraction that's getting you held up in the process, right? There may be a question around, you applied one time, right? There may have been a question around, were you ever arrested? And you answered no, right? That's untruthfulness, right? That may have been held against you in the past going forward, right? And I think at least having, and I'm not sure if it's an official policy, but having Michael in that space has at least helped us to at least take a closer look on a case-by-case basis. I think to your point, we need a better policy to make sure it's not happening across the board, so that by chance, if you don't know Michael and he doesn't have the ability to look at your particular case, you're not being disqualified. So Michael, I don't know if you can touch a little bit more on that policy there.
Yes, sir. Well, for the hair test in particular for the department, one, we immediately went to a urine test for our recruit applicants. As we call for the list for the next iteration coming up, we'll be continue to use the urine test until we get news otherwise. As it relates to to our bypasses, one, again, coming in 2017, I did an analysis of the number of bypasses and the reasons that people were being bypassed. We don't have a disparate impact on any specific group as it relates to bypasses. I think what's important to understand is the decisions that we make as it relates to bypasses and as it relates to promotional exams. You mentioned the promotional exam. I want to make sure I touch on that, but we relate both to the actual job function. So someone's not going to be bypassed if they have one speeding ticket. They'll be bypassed if they have an NSE class, which means you have a certain number of infractions within a short amount of time. And so that puts into question your driving or the judgment behind the wheel. That's directly related to the job function. So we're going to bypass that candidate. It's not a no forever, but it's a no for a period of time. If they show better judgment over a period of time of, say, 5 years past the NSC class, then they're able to perhaps proceed through the interview process. So it's important that this body understands that we're not making arbitrary decisions as it relates to people's backgrounds and whether or not they would be suitable to be police officers. We have pretty hard line areas. If you have a felony, you cannot by law be a police officer. But if you have felonious conduct, it doesn't necessarily disqualify you. But what we're going to be looking at are patterns of behavior and things that you've done throughout your time up until the point we're reviewing that application to determine whether or not you're bypassed. If you are bypassed, every applicant we give the information that they have the right to appeal that bypass. The commission will review that. Civil Service Commission reviews that. If they uphold it, the bypass, then it's a no. Oftentimes it may not be a no forever, but
do all the appeals go through the civil service?
Only if the applicant themselves appeal the process. And many applicants partner with some of our affinity groups, MAMLIO, And the
Mhm.
lawyers, I think they changed it again, LCJ.
LPR, yep.
LCR, yep. They, would be happy to work with a lot of the applicants in terms of their bypass and helping them through that process. So we're not making any arbitrary decisions. We have a standard operating procedure that we like
What would be
to.
helpful is, Michael, if you could send us that, because I think it came up in conversations before, but we never had a written policy or process or procedures attached.
Mhm.
So if you could send that to the council, that would be great. It's something we can share and review, just what the policy is, what the review process is, essentially what you were talking about now.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
would be helpful to us.
Yes, ma'am. And lastly, with regard to the promotional exams, recently in press conferences, when you have BPD representatives talking about the fairness of an exam, there's an ongoing lawsuit that's from 2008. We've had 2 exams since then, including our most recent exam, which are different processes. We did an analysis of the actual job function. We had subject matter experts, which are people that are in positions that are being tested internally within the department, create a survey and answer a survey to determine the different components of an exam and how we can best assess our supervisors, as well as the weight that's going to be associated with each component. So now we have a written test, we have a in basket or a scenario, and then we have an oral board, which is someone actually reporting to or responding to a scenario and almost like on the job and what you would do and what judgment you would exercise. We feel that that is a fair process. We feel
When were those changes made, Michael?
this 2020 this exam that we're administering now, we have that, and in 2015 we also had an oral component to it, so it's not just a written test and your education and experience, and it's not just the 80-20 split. There are percentages weighted toward each component, and these percentages relate to the job analysis. So if our supervisors are saying that communication is really key, there's going to be more weight on the oral board in your presentation as opposed to the written test. And so we look to continue to evolve and continue to look at best practices across the nation to make sure that we can administer fair exams. And again, have a good, robust applicant pool so we can draw from that applicant pool and make good supervisors.
2 questions, and then I'm going to go back to Council Mejia, who I know is patiently waiting before we wrap up, because I know it's getting late. So I appreciate you guys. So actually on the promotional piece, so that case, right, is that case done with? Have we appealed that case? What's the status right now of that case, specifically on the promotional exams?
Again, I don't have information on where they are with that.
Okay.
But I would say that they didn't find that initially they didn't find the test was unfair or had any bias to it. Again, they're going to go back and forth. We're concentrating on the 2020 exam. We were informed by our past exams and feedback.
No, that's helpful. I mean, I think there was some who suggested the case did find the exams to be discriminatory more than once and ordered back pay. So, but I can separately follow up on that piece, Michael, to counsel's office. But this update around promotional exams generally is helpful. My last piece, in the report talks a lot about the culture of the department, which I think other counselors were getting at too. I'm curious, the fire department, others have talked about doing racial equity trainings, various things. What departments have done what in that vein to shift culture? And then that's my last question before I go to Council Mejia.
Counselor, what I would say to that is we're in the process now of rolling out our racial equity training with our consultant. What I like about the way we're doing this training, it's very thorough in terms of the consultants are taking their time to really drill down on the departments and understand what the needs are. So a lot of one-on-one engagement, a lot of engagement with the public. We plan on rolling out those trainings beginning in March. In the meantime, I know
For which departments? All the part?
That'll be for all, that'll be for all departments, including our public safety agencies. The other piece I'll mention is that, you know, not only have we added a chief equity officer and sort of building out that shop, we're also building out the equity shops in all of our public agency offices, and putting more resources. And so, for example, one of the calls that came from the police task force recommendation was building out the equity offices within BPD. And I know those are recommendations we're looking to move on. So I would just say, you know, on the culture piece, we have a lot more work to do. We recognize that. And we know that the trainings we're going to do are going to be a part of a series of trainings, because we know the public safety agencies are more specific. And so their trainings have to align with obviously their functions. So this will be, you know, a piece of sort of the larger work we plan on doing going forward.
Well, we're just pushing, you know, on that timeline, because I know we've been talking to departments about this. They understand the importance and how it has to be tailored to their specific departments and needs. But I know that was a big topic of discussion for some time amongst counselors, for specifically not only with respect to the fire department, but also some of the other departments too. Councilor Mejia.
Yes, thank you. This has been very educational. Really do appreciate all the chiefs and Councilor Campbell for her leadership in this space. I just have one quick question. I'm going back to just the way people are experiencing our various departments. And I'm just curious as to whether or not you all have a system in place to provide feedback to folks who didn't get hired, what information is shared with folks, what technical assistance is provided to folks so that they can reapply. Is there a mechanism in place to kind of shepherd people along this process?
Yeah, Council, what I would say to that is, you know, in our water and sewer agency, we had this issue of, you know, people feeling undervalued and feeling like they didn't have the opportunity to sort of move up the ranks. And I think to your point, one thing we did to try to address that was, you know, expand trainings for everyone across the board, so that when these positions became available, that we had folks in line who were able to do the job, right? So that's one way we were able to sort of, you know, make a little bit of progress in that regard.
Yeah, so I'm more concerned about the folks who didn't pass the civil test. I'm less concerned, well, I'm concerned about everybody, but I guess my question in particular is about those who did not, I guess, meet the standards of any of the departments, and what support, if any, is provided to folks. Like when you don't get a job, oftentimes like, oh, well, you didn't get a job, bye, you know, but I'm just curious, is there like a mechanism in place to say, you know, you tried really hard, you didn't meet the mark, here's 5 things that I would recommend that you do, and is there some cultivation? Because if people already take the initiative to apply and they miss the mark, I'm just curious, if we have people who are interested, how can we cultivate that batch of applicants?
Yeah. And I think to your point, you know, one thing we need to do a better job of, it doesn't happen all the time, is when people, and this doesn't have to just do with public safety, when people are bypassed for jobs, we need to do a better job of communicating to them why they're bypassed for the jobs. So they can know what they need to do for the next time, right? So they can get ready for that. And then the other piece I found is that there's always a thirst for sort of knowledge, especially when it comes to employees of color, of trying to find that person or that mentor that they can go to talk about, hey, what did you do to sort of get to where you are? And sort of, so one thing we've really tried to do is sort of build out our employee resource groups, which has been really helpful in connecting people who may have been sort of siloed out, people who worked in transportation their whole careers, or water and sewer their whole careers, who may not get to cross collaborate a lot of it. And that what that's done is it's exposed our leadership to a lot of younger individuals, people who were Donnie Tavares 5-6 years ago, who I may be able to mentor, and really created that sort of network across the administration. So I think, we need to do a better job of anytime anyone is bypassed, explaining to them why they were bypassed. It also does a lot to sort of cultivate the fear that people of color are being bypassed for sort of minuscule reasons, and they're actually qualified for these jobs. So when you go to someone and say, hey, you weren't bypassed because of race, it's because this person's been in the job 21 years and they beat you off seniority, right? That goes a long way in sort of building culture within the administration, so people know they're valued, and people hear them. So to your point, I think that's something we're working on, but we're also working to build out this mentorship piece within the building, so people have someone they can turn to, right, and say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. Can you help, right?
Okay, that's it, Councilor Campbell. Thank you, Chief Tavares. I really do appreciate your input and look forward to being a partner. I'm the chair of workforce development. I think that we should be able to work more closely together to address some of these concerns. So thank
No,
you.
that's right. And thank you, Council Mejia. You know, when we started this work, it wasn't just, of course, to get at diversity in the departments, to build trust and community, but also recognizing these are high-paying jobs that people want. Boston residents dream of getting, right? And so doing everything we could to eliminate any barriers to access, specifically for women and people of color. So thank you, Council Mejia. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Campbell, and thank you to the panelists that are here that provided excellent recommendations, feedback, and what you're working on. Just wanted to highlight one issue that I failed to mention when I was talking to Deputy Commissioner Wong from the Fire Department. I know you referenced a individual, Connie, that was a homeless disabled veteran. And as a disabled veteran myself, I should have mentioned to you that if that disabled veteran needs, I know he's homeless, if he needs help, please let me know. And there's a lot of great programs for homeless veterans here in Boston. So I didn't want to let that pass without saying that. So you have my number. So if you want to give me a call, but I want to make sure we try to help that homeless veteran if we can.
Great, thank you. Certainly, I'll pass that on. Thank you, Councilor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Campbell.
No, thank you, Councilor Flynn, and thank you for your leadership and partnership, specifically on the veterans issue and bringing that unique perspective. Appreciate you. And obviously we are way past time, so I don't want to drag this on any longer. I know how busy all of you are. I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for being a part of the conversation. I see actually, Councilor Braden, are you back on? Did you want to say a few words? I know you had to step off and step back on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm
No problem.
listening. I'm listening in. I had to step off for a little while. I just want to thank everyone for the discussion this afternoon. I think, as I mentioned, this is a hugely important issue, and making our public safety personnel having a more diverse workforce is really a very important issue, and when we live in such a diverse city. So I'm looking forward. I applaud all the efforts that are being executed right now to advance this issue, and I look forward to working with you all to do what I can to help in the effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. I appreciate it, and thank you for your partnership as well. And thank you all for participating. Shane, do we have anyone here for public testimony?
No, we don't. We're all set, Madam Chair.
Okay. So thank you all. Obviously, we'll continue to stay in contact with you guys as we work in partnership with the administration, council colleagues on doing everything we can to remove any barriers to folks trying to obtain these jobs, of course. And we want to support you in any way. Appreciate your leadership. Obviously was taking a lot of notes on the collaboration across departments, language preference. The battle with the state is real, so I appreciate the fight with respect to each and every one of you on those issues. And Chief Tavares will obviously stay in touch with you on pieces of the report, but also the recommendations from the task force as well, which are critically important and relate. Everyone stay safe and healthy. Enjoy the holiday season. Continue to take care of yourselves. And I extend my gratitude along with all of my council colleagues with respect to you guys being first responders. We don't take that for granted in the midst of this pandemic. So thank you to each and every one of you for the work you do. And we'll see you at the next hearing. So thank you. This hearing is adjourned. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor.